out of 14 athletes, they're from 9 different countries as well. So we're very spread out through the world. Most of the internationals have a lot of experience because it's in Europe, it's a mainstream sport. And so, those athletes, they just grow up doing it. They've been doing it their whole life. And then, but then on the other side, we have like Kelly, who was on the swim team here at U of A her first year. She switched to triathlon the next 2 years, and she took second at the national championship. So, we're able to find those unicorns that kind of set themselves apart from the others.
The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all one place, zorfitness.com. Today we got on Wes Johnson. Day, I'm going to let you intro him because you know him a lot better since we've just met, but take it away, Day.
Yeah, for sure. So for most of the people listening on this podcast, if they know me, then they know that I work at the University of Arizona as a strength and conditioning coach. And as in that position, I get to work with a lot of the head coaches for the different teams that we have there, one of them being triathlon. So Wes is the head coach for the women's triathlon team at the University of Arizona. One thing that I would say immediately with Wes is he is someone who I think is an amazing coach all around. And there's different reasons for that. He cares about the people, he cares about the sport and being a learner and learning a lot about it and just knowing the details. He cares about culture. And, it's when you have a coach who's passionate about the people, the sport and everything, it's kind of you're going to build a champion team. And he did that in 2 years. And it's been awesome working with him. And I'm super fortunate. So Wes, I'll give you the floor for a little bit so you could talk a little bit more about the details of your career.
Well, hold on. We got to get
Okay.
We got to get the headlines first. So save that thought, Day. But the women's triathlon program started in 2023. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And then 2024, this most recent season, you guys were national champs.
Correct. Yes.
So just for a little bit of perspective for people, fresh program and you win the national championship. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And he has a cool story that I've heard him say a few times about when he started, what his goal was and how he achieved that. So, all right, now I could give it to Wes, correct?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Okay, sure. We have lots of other accolades that we could throw at him, but for now, we'll let him talk.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been really, really great and rewarding working with Day because she's just like you said, you're just so open to learn, all about the sport, and you even kind of started doing endurance training to learn more. So it's pretty cool how invested you become, and the athletes feel that as well. So thank you. Before 2023, I hadn't worked in NCAA. I had worked more through the, Olympic pipeline, trying to getting athletes to the highest level, but not through NCAA. And before I took the job, I didn't, NCAA is almost 10 years now. The triathlon's been in NCAA almost 10 years now. So it's still pretty new compared to a lot of most other sports. So I didn't think it was a pipeline to Olympics quite yet. We're ready for it. But then as I'd taken this job, I've realized, there's no specific reason why it can be ready for that. It's really up to us. And that's why we kind of started with, with a why not me, why not us? Because why can't we get athletes? It's up to us. It's up to our culture and everything that we're building here. And I, did things a certain way before with a good network with strength coaches and Day acknowledged, she hadn't worked with triathletes before. And so we brought in some people that had done strength and conditioning and for triathletes, and she just absorbed it so quickly. And then we just created this collaboration with all of our staff, they included, and we have good collaboration with everybody. Everybody has their role, and we trust each other, and the athletes trust our staff as well. So it's really, really powerful when there's a high level of trust. I think almost anything is possible when everybody's bought into the process, and that leads to eventually to the outcomes we want, but we keep the focus on the process. And that's what led to, our team kind of becoming obsessed with this team motto of why not me, why not us? Because, no one expected us to win in our second year, but, starting this year, everything I saw from these athletes, there was absolutely no reason why it couldn't be us. And so we set that, that foundation last year with the first team, and there were great leaders, and they were ready to bring in freshmen, and the freshmen just came in seamlessly, and it just happened so naturally. They just jumped right in, and it was like we had been a team for years. And it doesn't mean everything was easy, right? We're culture is something that you have to invest in it every single day, or it can, there can be holes, there can be, you have to fill in those holes every single day. You have to put in your little deposits every single day. And then, after winning national championships, even now starting this new year, there's like new things we're dealing with. Now we're national champions. Now, how do we keep the culture progressing and not regressing? Because I feel like there's been some moments where we've had, little regressions, but we're kind of just starting over again this year and this season and training and all the different kind of emotions after winning. And so it's like a whole different kind of culture now that we have to rebuild in a different way. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and the best thing about it is we're just getting started.
Yeah. So I would imagine that collegiate triathlon, obviously, like there's things like distances and things that could be different, but outside of that, just like the environment that you're in and the fact that athletes are probably on the younger side, like probably a different feel than what your day-to-day was for the basically like a decade with the national team. To you, like what's like the big differences there, and like are you like enjoying the current position?
Yeah, I love it. I even before I was still generally working with this age on the development side of, juniors, collegiate age. I was still similar
Okay.
age I was working with. I did have some older athletes as well that were a little bit more into their career, but I'd say I was still working a lot with a little bit of the younger. I also had been pretty involved I was national team coach in Rio Games for Paralympics, actually. So I had an athlete win the gold medal there, and in triathlon, and bronze on the track. And so, I've seen kind of all angles of the sport, from like amateur level as well, that do Ironmans and long distance, all the way up to, shorter distance, which is in collegiate triathlon. And so I've been able to kind of see all areas of the sport, and this is definitely kind of my niche. It's like that what I like the most. I like this age. I have a very, sometimes to a fault, sometimes it helps, but a very obsessive personality. So I kind of just go all in, and that's why I like working with this age of athletes, because they're at the stage where if they want to get to the Olympics and be the best in the world, they're very much all in. And so I kind of align with my thought process kind of aligns with that as well. And so I hold them to a high standard. They hold me to a high standard, and we understand each other that way, and I understand them. So I think that's similar. The ages, I think that what's different is just starting was learning like the NCAA like compliance side of things, the rules, who I can recruit, when I can recruit, how I can
Yep.
recruit, and then also just stick the rules when we're here, hours per day, hours per week, that kind of stuff. So we're able to be really smart about the hours we do use and the hours we train, and make the most out of the time we have. And I think, the strength and conditioning side especially is a way to make a lot of bang for your buck for per hour spent, right? I think with without the strength and conditioning to make up for it, you almost have to just do miles and miles and miles and miles of easy, or that's how some coaches look at it. Where I think you can bring that down a little bit because through strength and what Day's doing with them, we're able to minimize risk of injury. They're stronger in general, and I don't think they need excessive volume. I think the strength it makes them more efficient, and we're able to make more out of each hour. So it's, yeah, I'm loving this process, loving this journey with this team, and I also have a separate pro group as well that I work with, mostly med on that side. So
yeah, you guys are really developing that area to be known for triathlon, which is cool. That's not something I thought about before, was like how you're limited on time. Is that something that you would actually butt up against? Like, you just don't have enough time with a team?
I mean, before, there were some athletes I coached that we would get up to 30 hours in a week of training. Yeah. And there are, the athletes that there's like an elite athlete exception through their national federations or the Olympic committees. If they're on their national team, they can get approval to have less restrictions. But still, I'm still they still have school load, so yeah. Still mainly managing like what is best for them. Some athletes need a little bit more volume than others, and so some of them need, a little less and more downtime, and so they all have kind of different needs, and it's really understanding, what each athlete needs for them to be at their best. Some athletes need to be around people all the time. Some athletes need lots of alone time to reset. So too much group training for some maybe is overkill, where some they just thrive on that. And so there's that side of it. There's metabolic profiles of different athletes of different needs. Some lack aerobic conditioning. Some are fine on that. They lack explosiveness, speed, power, all that. So we can kind of play with those things and kind of like have all these dials, that we're going up and down with, we also within swim, bike, run. Some athletes have a weakness of swimming versus running or cycling. So just, I think a lot of teams fall into the trap, whether it's out of laziness or out of just hours in the day as a coach, to really customize what they're doing. But if you're really doing it right, I think you can have some athletes swimming a certain amount, but then some athletes are, breaking up into groups and creating those individual plans to make the most out of where they want to go and where, what their goals are and what they're able to do, what their capacity is and durability is, to stay healthy and keep progressing with this level of training that we have, but also stress in school, stress, all those different kind of stresses they may have. I'm monitoring kind of all of those things just to make sure their training stress is supported by the stress of the rest of their life, and not, they've got a lot of stress at that age. They also don't have, access to full brain capacity until, 20, 26-ish. So they're, take on stresses differently than others, and school stress or boyfriend girlfriend stress type stuff, there's just all these different kind of stresses. So it's looking at it holistically and making sure they're doing the right kind of load for them to progress, because it's not just more is more. Sometimes you give them more and they go backwards. So it's got to manage it all right and really be in tune with each athlete. And so, I like being in person with that. I've coached a lot of athletes remotely over the years too. And there's a lot of data now, and I think there's a lot of, it's much more possible than it used to be. But I really like seeing athletes in person, reading body language, and can kind of tell, a lot of times I can tell if they're going to have a good day before they even
Yeah.
just jump in the water. So yeah.
How many girls are on the team?
This year there was 14, and yes, next year there'll be more like 11 or 12.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the kind of the breakdown of like their backgrounds? I mean, obviously, I'm sure some have done triathlon, but Day always brings up this point of like often you have somebody who comes from a discipline and then you have to try to develop them in the other two maybe to get them to be a well-rounded triathlete. So what's
Yeah.
the typical breakdown that you see or maybe the bias that people come in with?
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of diversity on that with this team. Also, we have out of 14 athletes, they're from 9 different countries as well. So we're very spread out through the world. But yeah, the most of the internationals have a lot of experience because it's in Europe, it's a mainstream sport. So, I went to the Junior World Championships, and there's 500,000 spectators on the streets, and in
Wow.
Hamburg, Germany, like city center, triathlon is happy, they're racing there, and people all know the sport. Cycling and triathlon is huge out there.
Yep.
And so, those athletes, they just grow up doing it. They have to do it their whole life. And then, but then on the other side, we have like Kelly, who was on the swim team here at U of A her first year. She switched to triathlon the next the next 2 years, and she took second at the national championship. So, we're able to find those unicorns that kind of set themselves apart from the others, and she's definitely one of them. We have some others that came from, like Lydia Russo came from a running background, ran for Oregon. Oregon's one of the best running schools. And so, but she had a lot of injuries, and now triathlon, she's been healthy longer than she ever has in sport, and she's just thriving. And now that she's graduating out, she's probably gonna go up to long course and do Ironman stuff. But yeah, with kind of all different backgrounds. So that's another reason why the training can't look exactly the same. Some of them come in with, Kelly never had really ridden a bike much in her whole life. The good thing about swimmers have such strong engines because they train so much growing up. The biking is not as much skill as it is just raw, fitness, engine power. So once they get enough power on the bike, ride enough miles, their engine matches up to their cycling ability, and they become great cyclists most of the time. And then the run is good thing. It's like she grew up running as well, so it wasn't as hard, but we had to change a lot of things because she was a sprinter running. So she was more like, the first time we saw her run, is like she's not even running, she's just bounding. She's just leaping. And so we had to change a lot of mechanical stuff, and now she's just thriving. And we have, I could go through each one. They've all got so many different kinds of backgrounds, and even some of the ones that grew up in triathlon, there's a lot of holes they were missing in their training because, part of the year they're running track, part of the year they're swimming with their high school team, part of the year summer they're doing triathlon. So there's all these holes of development that we're able to try to fill those holes in their first year. And it's a learning curve. A lot of times the freshman year is a hard year learning triathlon at this level because they have to learn how to train this much and manage school, and so we've seen more of the injuries in their freshman year, as well. As closely as we try to manage that, and there's still just stuff they have to learn, and we got to be okay with them learning the hard way as much as we try to avoid that. Sometimes they just have to, because last year we saw the same thing, and then those athletes that were freshmen last year, all of them are just thriving this year, doing so well. So it's just a learning curve to be just an athlete at that level and training that much and managing your school load and how much downtime you rest sleeping enough. So I use like the Whoop for a lot of them. up to them, So NCAA rules requires that I don't require that. So it's up to them if they want me to see it. But they those that have it, especially all my pro group for men, I look at that closely and match that up to the training every day, and I can tell what's stressing them out, if it's the training or if it's stuff out of training or lack of sleep or whatever it is. So, sorry for rambling.
No, this is super informative. I mean, I didn't know a lot of this, and yeah, it's helpful. They don't let me snowplow the whole conversation. Get in there with your questions.
Oh, not good.
But yeah, like, so you got like a group of 14 in 2024 or whatever. It was kind of, take me through like maybe like a typical week. Is it like you're sending off certain people and doing like training rides together? Are you like segmenting certain groups that are like at similar ability levels? Are some people getting more or less volume? Like, explain how you might coordinate all that, because that seems like a headache to me.
I mean, when they first arrive during the season, they're generally all pretty fit, and they arrive in August and we're racing like a couple weeks later. So at that point, I'm not, the freshmen especially, I pretty much have to take them where they're at. It's not, the fall for freshmen isn't really the development phase. It's after the season's over. I have to take them where they're at, and then that gives me so much perspective based off how they're raised and how they train to apply what we need to, starting January. Now we have a whole year, go through all the training cycles that we want to go through. But generally in a week, we swim, around 3 to 4 days together as a group, and then they might swim, two more like on their own, kind of easy recovery swims. So they swim a lot of times like 6 times a week for the most part. Some will choose to do another recovery swim on their day off as well. It's just more of a like really easy shakeout, and for them, swimming is so second nature for them that they can make it. I think recovery on the swim is easier to do than on the run. Like a recovery swim or bike is easier to do than a recovery run. Yeah. And so they'll do that. And so then on the bike, we will, a lot of days they'll still bike easy. So they're biking still probably 4 or 5 times a week, but some of them might be 30 or 45 minutes super easy. And then we'll have, some structured bikes in there as well. And sometimes those could be on the bike trainer, or they can be out on the road. We have a good path system here in Tucson, so we're able to keep them pretty safe, and not too much in the dangerous cars and all that. If you've been on a bike, I've been hit by a car before, so it's like it's always scary. But there's, when we go to hill repeats, we're on the road, on the bike, so we're always managing that the best we can. And then they have these group rides here in Tucson, called the Shootout on Saturday mornings. And so a lot of times they'll do that. It's really, a lot of pros come here to ride train on the bike, pro cyclists. And so they'll join those local group rides, and there can be 200 people in it on Saturday morning. So it gives a lot of good tactical experience of, riding in a pack and learning how to be efficient in a group. And so that's nice to have here. And then for running, we'll have, we try to keep, if we're working on this, what I've learned is the frequency of the discipline builds the skill, and the duration builds the fitness. So on this, if we're trying to learn a new skill, we need like a high frequency for that skill to acquire that skill. And if we're just working on fitness, we might start, get building more duration, and then maybe race specific intensity when we're getting closer to the races. So, with the running, we'll typically have like one longer run in the weekend. And then there'll be like a mix of either track running or hill running, or with like mid zone, like tempo type running, during the week. So we kind of alternate between between those intensities, but also depends on the time of year. Up until now, for the most part, we've just done a lot of base volume, good focus on strength and mechanics and skill, and so most of the athletes are doing a 5K running race this weekend in Phoenix, and so we kind of start this, like, sets our baseline for the year. Here's where we are without a lot of like intensity or speed work yet, and then to kind of draw that line in the sand of like where we're at now, and now we can map out where we want to be, you know, in the next phase of training. And so we talked about that this morning. You know, they a lot of have so much anxiety about, oh, this is my first race, I haven't done like race specific intensity, I'm so nervous, I have no idea how I'm going to do. And I told them this morning, you know, this in January, February, a 5K race does not determine how your year is going to go. It literally just determines what your next phase of training looks like. So we're, you know, that's because some of them get into this mindset of comparing with other athletes on the team, or comparing for past self, or, you know, the thing is, it's early February. It's you know, we haven't even done the specific work yet. So, but we also want to know where we're at, and we don't want to go 6 months, 4 months, or whatever without challenging like the mental side of racing. So that's why we're kind of doing that this weekend, to have that opportunity. You know, the nerves before the race, nerves during the race, you know, how your emotions after the race. That's a whole thing that takes practice. So so that's why we're just doing a 5K race. You know, give it a shot and practice it, and then come in March we start racing, and they start racing for their countries. So we, you know, we'll race in Mexico. Some will race in Mexico, and we'll race in Miami, and then there's a whole junior circuit. So those that are still 19 and under, they'll race in junior circuit, and then a bunch of them will have a European race block probably in the summer for their countries. So yeah. Did I tell you enough on the week schedule, or it's kind of I could.
Yeah, it's hard to get into one thing without getting into everything, which
Yeah,
is
it is.
that's the nature of training. But no, I mean that's really helpful. I think one of the things that Day said was a challenge is that, like, basically as soon as they get back on campus, it's like you're almost tapering for your first competition.
Yeah, on the
So
fall.
it's almost like you're seeing where they're at, especially for the freshmen, and then it's like then you adjust course come like winter, spring is what it sounds like, and like basically you're working with what you got built in the fall.
Yeah, yeah. We over the Christmas break when they go home, you know, seems like a lot more happens then. Then some show up super fit and ready, and then some show up even injured, you know. And it's like, oh man, because I'm not monitoring things as much when I'm not even allowed to. With a lot of them, they're over Christmas break, and they know that everything has to be optional, and they're so incredibly driven. They're not the type of people you have to push. They have to more hold back. So when they have a little more free reign, they like kind of go too far a little bit. And so they're starting to learn that, because I lose my ability to like give them exactly what they need to do in that time period. I'm not even allowed to, right? So it's there. They have to learn on their own. It's a hard thing. But then when they get here, we're able to kind of get back on track. And, you know, we have got great athletic trainer, and with Day kind of figuring out exactly what they need, and get with the dietitian and sports clinic and all that, and start lining everything up to get back on track. But hopefully, you know, over the years, you know, after freshman year, after sophomore, it's junior year, they start getting better and better at those off times and learning, you know. And that's all we're trying to teach, is like any failure or hard thing you go through or injury, like as long as we're learning, we're progressing, and that's what we got to make sure happens. Because I think it's easy to have those failures or injuries, and it becomes more of a PTSD thing. They're like, you're just scared of it happening again, or you go into this fear of failure, and it just really doesn't help their progression in the sport, you know. So we have to rewire that mindset and look at it as they're learning. Yeah, we're just learning. We're just, how can this help us in the future? And I think it can help us or it can hurt us, and it's how we're wired to build from those and make it a positive thing instead of a negative.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the big differences between the collegiate athletes and your pro athletes is that the pro people, you can monitor them all the time.
Yeah.
And they have all this experience, or likely all this experience that they can kind of fall back on and are more mature in certain aspects. And then it's like with the collegiate women, it's like you have to teach them how to monitor themselves appropriately because you can't be there all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a much different problem that you're trying to attack.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But I think even on the pro side, like I want to build athletes that are self-sufficient and
Yeah. Yep.
you know, that's when you get into the race, like I'm lost, my part is over, right? It's
Yeah.
like they have to think and make decisions on the spot for themselves. And so I have to create those opportunities where they learn from themselves. And sometimes, I mean, it's the same. I have 4 kids too. So it's like, it's the same thing teaching kids. You got to let them make their mistakes sometimes, you know, got to let them.
Do you ever sleep?
Well, luckily I have a 2-year-old and luckily he's sleeping now. So if he's sleeping, we're sleeping. And they go to bed, you know, goes to bed at 8ish. So gets me to bed super early too. And get closer to day's schedule, which is like 7 to 4 or whatever, sleeping, which I love, but it's also not always possible when the kids have activities and stuff. But anyways, now I'm going off tangents.
Yeah, so tell me how like day gets integrated into this a little bit. So you kind of gave us a bit of a weekly snapshot of what training roughly looks like in terms of the disciplines, but where does day's strength conditioning fit in with all that?
Yeah, you know, with our metabolic testing we do, we get their, you know, training zones and also just kind of metabolic profile of where their strengths and weaknesses are. So I share those with Day also. And then she does also her strength testing, which maybe she can talk about, but she does some testing that kind of, you know, also lays some profiling of understanding like where they're at strength wise. And then we look at endurance and see if we can match things up, like with what's happening. Look at their run mechanics also, you know, analyze the run mechanics and try to match that up with what they're doing with strength with Day. And we kind of create a good collaboration through all of that and really understanding what each athlete needs. And you have to have a long-term perspective, big picture perspective, because it's never a one-day magic pill, right? It's always a big process. So trying to get the athletes on board with understanding that process and working together with both of us, it's nice because, you know, before this job, there was a lot more that was just all on me, you know, on strength conditioning, on everything. And now it's like to have this network where you have eyes on very specific things. It's just, that's high performance. Like one person can do it all, you know? So I think a good coach can be humble and really rely on their staff and people that are working with the athletes. And we just have incredible people working with these athletes that we just have 100% trust that we know that, you know, they're taking care of the day, taking care of on the you know, athletic training side, keeping them healthy. But, you know, of course they don't live in a glass box. So like things can still happen. And, I guess don't live in a glass box. Yeah. If I got that analogy right. But so I don't know, give maybe Day, what do you want to share what you do with like the strength testing and stuff and how you use that?
Yeah. So, as Wes mentioned, he does the metabolic testing with them. And I try to help out with those sometimes. So when we do like the pricking of the ear and all that to get their lactate. And every time we do it, I feel like I forget the steps and I'm asking a million questions while Wes is literally trying to coordinate like everyone. And I'm like in the corner asking him all the questions.
So is Wes running the tests? Or is there like an expert who's there?
Yeah, it's me, and
Yeah.
me and my assistant coach Jocelyn, and then so I'm kind of sometimes I'm just because we've had times where we've had three people testing at the same time, so
Yeah.
I'll be looking at all of and
Running around.
yeah, I'll be kind of like making sure we're doing the right protocol, giving the right if it's on the bike, we're starting at the right wattage on the bike,
Yep.
to based off their history, so. Yeah, so there's always a lot going on, but we have a good system where we have the testers, we have the recorders, and I'm making sure that, sometimes I'll be testing as well, or I'll be just monitoring all the testers, make sure we have the right protocol happening with them, and just to make sure we're getting the correct results, or else you don't need to test if we're not doing it right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Sorry. Go
Day's
ahead, Day.
very helpful in that.
Yeah, so I get all that information from Wes. He sends it to me, and then in the weight room, we do a few tests on the force plates, and it's super helpful, right? We have that technology there. It gives us a lot of good objective data without really accumulating any fatigue, because the force plates, you're essentially just doing 3 counter movement jumps. And from those jumps, you get a ton of metrics, metrics that have to do with asymmetry and imbalances, metrics that tell us the power output, as bilaterally and unilaterally. So, and then all these other things too, that if we do testing weekly, we can also do fatigue monitoring and kind of gauge how things are going. So initial testing, I do the counter movement jumps on the force plates. I also do an isometric thigh pull, where essentially they're holding this bar and they're yanking that bar off the chains as hard as they can, and that will measure their lower body strength output. So that's also a super helpful one. So I'm getting a power metric and a strength metric. And then in addition to that, I like to do some relative body weight testing. So we're doing some pull-ups, chin-ups, and some push-ups, and then a core test that we do. And from there, I'm able to get a good profile of like where the athlete's at, right? And like Wes was saying, we have athletes from all different disciplines. So you see the swimmers, they're amazing at doing the pull-ups, so it's usually not an issue. Someone that's coming with a running background, usually that's something that's a little bit more underdeveloped and they're not doing so hot on that test, but it's just giving me an indicator. And then also we do some mobility testing just to get a look at how their body's moving. So we do like an overhead squat test with dowel. We're doing a knee to wall to get some ankle mobility view, which is always interesting with triathlon because you want mobile ankles for swimming, but you want stiff ankles for running. So trying to find that happy medium. And then we're also looking at hip internal and external rotation. So just trying to get a full view of the athlete, where they're at. And then with all that information, I just kind of create a little dashboard on them. So I you click one of the athletes' name, their little picture comes up, and then just like a profile of how they tested that semester. And then over time, we're getting trends of information. And then that gives us an idea like, hey, they're trending in the right direction or vice versa.
Yeah, it's been really helpful because we're already seeing the benefits of it, especially the athletes that were freshmen last year. They're just, you can tell, I've just made gains, and that doesn't just happen naturally. That helps to happen with real intent and getting what Day's doing, what we're doing, and we're just want to keep going from here. Even with what we have, I still think there's a lot of areas we can still even be better. I'm always looking to find those areas and what those are. Sometimes I just need more time in the day to analyze things more. So I just got to be even more time efficient, so always trying to figure out how we can raise our game.
Yeah. And then like Wes was saying too, I think that's the great thing about working in the college setting is you have like a high performance unit where you have athletic trainers, dietitians, and you have the head coaches who are the experts, the strength coach, all that stuff. So with that, like myself, athletes, Wes, Jossie, who are the triathlon coaches. And then Jesse, who is the athletic trainer, we went to the bike fit up in Scottsdale, and that was extremely informative too. We did that in it was like the beginning of the fall semester, I think.
Yep.
And it's super helpful because Jesse, obviously as an athletic trainer, has a really good understanding of, just anatomy and all that stuff and biomechanics. And she's writing these super detailed notes and relaying them to me. And then those are things that I use when I'm writing programming for them and what they need based on all that information. And it was pages of notes per athlete because each test is hours long when they look at each person. So we're getting all the information we can.
Do the athletes use their own bikes, or does the school provide them?
We provide them. So we're all our athletes on Trek bikes.
Gotcha.
And we kind of get a deal through to where we're going on the bike fitting. So it's good.
Yeah.
A good setup on these bikes. Yeah.
They can say they worked with the national champs.
Yeah.
Good marketing.
Well.
Yeah. Jay, you had a question about managing workload?
Yeah. So I know, Wes, like you mentioned, you're dealing with a spectrum of athletes, those who can handle higher workloads and others who can't. And you kind of have to balance all these stressors. So I'm curious, how you manage that. And also if you do see a difference between your male athletes and your female athletes, and what are some common trends you see in those differences?
Yeah, the differences on male and female, I've always been interested in learning that. But I think I really accelerated that process with this job because it's full team of females, right? And so I had to, even coming here, I wanted to make sure, me as a male coach, that they would even feel comfortable talking about, monthly menstrual cycles and stuff like that, and working that into training, discussions. And so I think we did well on that, where we felt we created a safe atmosphere for that, where they felt like they mattered, as women, and their training is different. They're not just, small men. So yeah, I think the research has mainly been done on men in the past, and so there's, kind of the bigger movement now of women are not small men, they have different systems that we got to train them differently. And so there's, I think also some of them can train a good amount if they just take care of themselves and eat enough, right? So sometimes in their freshman year, it's learning wow, I need to do better on that. I need to, for the first time, I'm, in charge of my own eating, in charge of, these things that has been taken care of before. And so sometimes either they're not eating enough at first, or some kind of on the wellness side. We can tell eventually with training if something's going wrong. At first I'll look at sleep. Are we getting enough sleep? And if we are we eating enough? And I'd say 90% of the time it comes down to one of those two things, why their training's suffering. And then if they're nailing both of those things, then we need to look at their blood panels, where are we at with iron? Where are we at? And if we're hitting all those things, they can train really well and train quite a bit. But it's really easy, human nature to fall short on some of those things, especially when you add in the school load. And so it's just being engaged with the athletes and talking to them and reading them and understanding, their own trends. You can start seeing when someone's going off track or if they're on track. So it's really just knowing them, I think, is the biggest thing. Really knowing them and understanding where they're coming from and what makes them tick, what makes them thrive, what leads to them being at their best, what leads to them being at their worst, and really just watching, observing a lot of the times, and not just shoving the information down their throat, but putting them in situations where they learn for themselves, because that you tend to see better results in the end that way. I think there's a lot of coaches that just overcoach and try to just shove it down their throats. And I think it's just an ego of the coach. I think if you really want to teach them, just create situations where they learn. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, the best way to do that is just really knowing them and investing into that process, investing in them and believing in them, and then having that two-way trust. And if that's there, I feel like it's not even a difference between men and women. It's a difference between person to person of what they need, because you really understand what they need just as an individual. And generally, yes, there's still a lot of differences between men and women, but there's also a lot of differences just between the 14 of them as well, So yeah, so to answer that.
Yeah. And then, if you didn't know, Wes is known as the feminist king. This is a name that was given to him by the team.
Yeah. When they arrived, and I was like, okay, I gotta get these girls to feel like they can talk to me about anything, and so we actually read a book. We had our book club on the female athlete and making a discussion about it. So I guess what led to that is calling me the feminist king. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like that's underappreciated in sport, and how, if you have a coach of the same gender, oftentimes there's certain things that you maybe don't need to talk about as explicitly, just because you're probably you've experienced it. Whereas in the situation you're in, it sets you up for having a much better culture on your team if you put in the legwork of understanding them and them, like you're saying, building the trust in that foundation.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks volumes of the type of coach you are. You're not you're obviously detail oriented and metrics driven and a lot of those other things, but it can't just be that.
Yeah.
You can't neglect the human aspect side of things.
For sure. Yeah, I don't think that needs to come first and foremost. I don't think any of the metrics and data mean anything if that is, because it's just they're not bought in, and if they're not bought in, it doesn't matter.
You had mentioned sort of that rough weekly outline. How do you think about measuring their volume and kind of keeping track of how much work they're doing?
So in the software I use called Training Peaks, I don't know if you're familiar. It's it creates, through all their training, if I have their thresholds accurate, it creates a performance management chart that I can track. It kind of gives me graphs where I can see trends of fitness. There's a training stress balance number that it goes, above 0 or below 0. So I can tell, off of that. But then also we'll look at just the HRV, HRV and resting heart rate from the Whoop. I can also tell if okay, they can't manage this load, we need to pull back. Or, they're managing it just fine, and their, recovery levels are off the charts, even with high volume. So, we can continue to progress. And so some athletes, run a lot more volume than the other athletes. And so it really just depends on the individual. But I monitor that. I think going back to knowing the athlete and reading them and looking at body language, looking at all that, and matching that up with looking at resting heart rate, HRV, and then all the training management chart and Training Peaks that I can see. Are they progressing, heading in the right direction? And also just listening to them, trusting their intuition as well. Is did they want to do more? Are they asking to do more? If we can figure out a safe way to do that, and they're eating enough and taking care of themselves, then I'm yeah, we can do a little bit more. But but then I can also see if they're recommending, I've heard a coach, an athlete that was a little bit sick, and the coach tell the athlete, or the athlete say, can I just go easier on this set? I'm a little tired. And the coach is like, no, I want you to just pretty much kill yourself on the set, and then the next day is like fully sick, right? So you got to like trust your athletes. Like if you don't have trust with your athletes, if athlete's saying he needs to pull back in a session, I'm going to trust the athlete. I'm going to pull him back. If I know there's other sports probably, or in high school athletes, like they're trying to get out of everything, right? This is not this population. They just want to do more, and so
yeah. That's why they like, and probably you like working with triathletes. It's like, like you were saying, you got to pull them back. It's not dangling carrots. It's like you keep pushing yourself too hard. The coach is there as much as anything just to provide a little bit of a governor at times.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't need to be doing more.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing we see with like on the strength side is a lot of times, like during the summer, they're all at their houses or vacationing, whatever, right? So I still program everything and I put it on the Bridge app that we use, where it logs all their workouts. And other teams, like I'll look at it and it's like no athlete has done any of the workouts all summer. And then like meanwhile triathlon is like they're vacationing somewhere and they're sending me a text like, hey, I'm gonna be here at the beach. Is there a beach workout I can do instead? Like they're still on track, like even when they're vacationing. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like it's great. So when they come back in the fall, like they're all good to go. Like I don't have to, be worried about that, which is super nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a change for you, but for me, it's like I'm used to this, so it's but I think there's still a uniqueness with this group for sure. They hold each other to a high level, and so it's even better. Sometimes it can be extreme on them just wanting to do too much, and I do need to hold it back at times for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Wes, thank you for doing this. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did as well. Thanks for having me. This is an honor.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it. And I always like picking your brain, so it's always
Anytime.
fun.
You know where I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening today. If you're someone who just started listening to the show, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date. If you're someone who's been listening for a while, I would encourage you to rate and review the show. And lastly, the best thing that you can do to support our work is also the best thing that you can do for your performance. And that is by hiring one of our coaches. Until next time, stay the course.